Hi again, everyone. This is the second part of my introduction to Photoshop. Exercise 4 is what I'm doing. So we're going to make a new document and make it 11 by 8.5. So I already made that, so it's in my repertoire here of custom documents. You'll see that the width is 11, 8.5. That's a letter size document. Resolution 300 dpi. That would be if you were to print it. So that'll be pretty big. You can change that to 200 if you wish. CMYK color. Background content's white. I told you transparent in the last part of my introduction, so first part of my introduction. But white is better because the JPEG seems to be coming in as a smart object. So then you have to rasterize it to get it to function as the kind of image we want. So make it the background contents white. And that's it. Say create. So now you're going to bring in the image. Notice that my background layer is up here. And yeah, I have my swatches and my color palettes, as I did before, my layer, my brushes, and my history. And actually in this exercise, we're not going to be using brushes so much. So you can put the brushes away by clicking on the word brushes and adding them to your palettes. And we are going to be using gradient. So you need to bring the gradient up. I don't see it in my palettes. So I can go to Window, Gradient, and Gradients. And you can put it into your layers. I'm going to add it to my swatches, color, and gradients. And then I'm going to bring layers and history because they're sort of stuck to my other palettes, and I don't want that. I want it to be totally floating so that I can put my palettes over to the right, and my layers and history I will stick onto the bottom of my floating palettes here. So here are my floating palettes. Yeah. And so I'm actually going to make the floating palettes, if I can, a bit smaller by going to their edge and pulling in. I'm making them as small as I can because I need the space. I'm on a laptop. So now I have my image, my document up. So say File, Place, and I'm going to place Embedded so that it's part of the document. And I'm going to that photo that I asked you to find last time. For the first part of this introduction to Photoshop, Man and Rocks. It's in your files for projects in Canvas. So say place, and it'll come in. It has, the dimensions of the image are longer and not as high as the document we just made. So you can actually go to the crop tool if you wish and bring in the bottom and the top. That's the crop tool, and then hit return. So now we have the image the way we wish. And again, I'm working in, if you go to Window, the workspace that I'm working on is Essentials. That'll make sure that you have the same tools that I'm working with, Essentials. So now I'm going to select the sky. As I told you, the top tools, the top quarter of the tools are selection tools in Photoshop. So we're going to use some of those selection tools, and then we're going to use the gradient, some of the paint tools, the painting tools in the second quarter of your toolbar. So this is the toolbar over here. I have it on my left, my tools. And I'm going to go over the tools, the selection tools with you a little bit more in detail than I did in the first part of this introduction. This is the move tool. You can move pixels around, selected pixels around. This is the marquee tool. You can use it to select geometric areas of pixels on the screen. I'll show you. It makes if you see the marching ants, if you possibly can see them, I just made a marquee of selected pixels. And I could put a color in by going to Edit, Fill, and you could fill with a color. Right now I have violet as my foreground color. So I'm going to say Fill. And actually, it doesn't seem to be available, so I have to check my layers and see why it's not. It seems that this layer still needs rasterizing. If you see a little square on the bottom of your layer here, Man and Rocks came in, so you have to go to, it means that it still needs to be rasterized. So you can do it in, yeah, you can do it in layer. So you can say layer, rasterize, and smart object. It seems still to be a smart object, this object that we brought in. And now it should let me fill. So just so that you can see the selection that I made, I'm going to fill it with the background color. So that was the selection that I made with the marquee tool. I'm going to undo this because we really don't want that. And I'm going to deselect, Command D. So other marquee tools, rectangular, elliptical, single row marquee, these are the other geometric marquee tools that you have. Then there's the lasso tool, and the only one that I've ever used is the magnetic lasso tool, which is this one. It's in the group at the bottom. It clings to the edge of differentiated areas. But the tools that I'm going to use with you right now are the quick selection tool and the magic wand tool. It's in with the quick select tool. You can get to know what that looks like. It's the most useful selection tool. Then you have the crop tool and a frame tool that I don't use too much. Yeah, so that's about it. And then we get into the painting tools in the second quarter of the toolbar, which I'll be doing with you in a minute. So we're going to change the color of this sky, because the object of this exercise is to change the time of day. So we're going from a kind of noon lighting, 12 o'clock noon lighting situation, to a dusk, sunset. So we have to select the blue sky. And there would be two ways to do that you might want to know. The quick selection tool or the magic wand tool. The magic wand tool selects similar pixels, and you can choose it, and then the settings on the tool, on the control bar above, would be for that tool. So I have a 5x5 average, tolerance 30, which is pretty high, contiguous selected, which means that you're selecting pixels that touch each other, not pixels that are separated. So if you clicked on this blue and there was other blue in the photograph, if you did not have contiguous checked, it would select the other blue as well. But because we have contiguous checked, it's only going to select the pixels that touch each other, the blue that touch each other in this photograph. Then sample all layers you could have checked, but we don't want to be sampling all layers right now. We just want to be sampling from the layer of the image that we're on. You could also select different radiuses of groups of pixels. 3x3 point sample, 11x11, but 11x11 seems too large. 5x5 seems about right for this. So with the magic wand, if you click, you can try this, you'll see that you get the top part of the sky, but not the bottom, because it's selecting within a certain tolerance. So if I hold Shift, that adds to the selection. So you'll get more pixels, and it's pretty accurate. So that's a pretty good way of selecting. I think a better way actually would be the quick selection tool. So I'm going to go to that. And with the quick selection tool, you notice that other quick select tools come up on the control bar above. So you have a quick select, normal, regular, a quick select plus, a quick select minus. If you move the quick selection tool around, bring it onto your image, and move it around in your image, you'll see that it looks like a brush. You can make it bigger or smaller with the brackets. So I'm making it bigger, and you watch it get bigger with the forwards bracket, and you could make it get smaller with this backwards bracket. Up above, you'll see that there's a plus and a minus. So you can make it, well, I'll be explaining that in a minute. Anyway, so I'm going to hit the quick select and move it around in the top of the sky. And you'll see that right away, it understood that we wanted to select the whole sky. It also selected some of the plants, but that doesn't really matter. Yeah. So it also selected some of the man's arm because it saw that the value was almost the same on the arm and the sky. So if we want to get rid of that, we can hold down Option or Alt on the PC, and that makes the quick select become a minus. I'm on the wrong tool. You have to go to the quick select tool. And make it small enough so you can move it around. So I'm doing the backwards bracket because the quick select acts much like a brush, and brushes are all made smaller and bigger with the brackets, forwards and backwards bracket. So I'm moving now, I'm holding Option on the Mac and moving the quick select around in the arm so that I take away from the selection. So now the arm isn't selected, but then I see that it did not, it neglected, the quick select didn't select inside the arm. And why is that? Because we had contiguous marked. So, or maybe just because we didn't actually have contiguous, it doesn't pertain to that tool. That's just how the tool works. So it just selects contiguous pixels. So I have to hold Shift. Shift adds to a selection. Hold Shift and use the quick select and just click, and it'll add that little area of blue to the selection. Then do the same thing for the other side of his arm here. So that, and you can even make the quick select tool a little bit smaller if you want to get more fine about your selection. So I'm holding Shift, and then I'm just kind of moving it up into the area and clicking. So now I have everything that I wanted selected. If you want to be more exact, and this is just an exercise, you can move around here with the hand tool and see if the edge is all selected the way you want. Maybe right in here, for instance, you'll see that you want to get more exact. So I'm going in and I'm doing Shift again. I go up to the quick selection tool, and I'm just, I'm holding Shift and adding this little area in to the selection. So Command 0 fits the window. Now, the idea of this is to change the sky to something that looks like dusk, sunset. So I'm going to put a gradient into the sky. When I click on the gradient tool, it's under the paint bucket tool. It's in with the paint bucket tool. So I have gradient tool, paint bucket tool, 3D material drop tool. I'm not sure, I don't use that too much. But gradient tool, click on that. And then you're gonna pull a gradient into this area. How do you know what your gradient should be? Well, up on the control, you'll see that it designates which gradients are available here. And you can move across the top and look and see the gradients. You can choose one, but I'm just gonna hover above. This one is color to transparent. I had purple, violet selected for some reason already, but if you hover above, it usually says what gradient you're selecting. And this is a color to solid, foreground to background, rather. This is foreground to transparent. This is black and white, and so forth, if you look at all the gradients. I'm going to select foreground to transparent because that's what I would like to, how I would like to paint the sky. So I'm pulling this gradient across with the gradient tool. If you go to gradients, you'll also see in the gradient palette that you've selected, it shows which ones you've selected. And now you have to choose, you could choose a color. And I actually want violet. I want to use violet, but if you don't want to use violet, you can change the color of that it's putting in. So for instance, let's say I want it to be more pink, this violet. So I click on that, and you'll notice that up above, you've changed your gradient, or you can look in your gradient palette and you've changed your gradient. So I'm going to pull that gradient across. It pulls from the color to transparent. So you can, it works like a paintbrush kind of. You just pull it into your selection. It knows where to put it because you've created a selection. In fact, the selection is so, often takes so much time that you want to save it. So I'm going to, I should have told you this before, select, save selection. I'm selecting it as sky. This is important. I always tell my students, save your selections. So I'm going to call it sky, and it's going to put it into the channels actually, and just say, okay. And now it's saved it. And then you can go back to pulling your gradient into this area, and notice that you're actually painting with the gradient into the selected area. If you think this is too much, do Command Z, undo, and you can change your opacity. I had it at 50%, which seemed okay, but, and you don't need to dither, and you don't actually need transparency, but my opacity is at 50%. My mode is normal. And I'm going to lessen that a little bit because I thought it was putting it on a bit too opaquely. So make it 40% or 30% so you can layer as you paint. So I'm going to pull the gradient again across the sky. Now it put on too much. So maybe you better use transparency. Yeah, use the transparency function, make sure that's checked, and go put some more in. So I'm gonna paint as much as I think is appropriate into here. And that's my sky. It looks like sunset. I don't like that, so you can keep working on this. All right, so I've finished the sky. So now I'm going to zoom out a bit. So the shortcut for zoom in and zoom out is plus and minus, command and control on the PC. Command on the Mac, control on the PC. So I'm going to say command 0, so I make it a little bit smaller so I can see what I'm doing. And now I want to select and paint on the rocks. So what's the easiest way to do this actually is to select inverse. So go up to the select menu and say select inverse. And now I have the rocks and the man selected. So you can save that selection. I'm going to go select, save selection. And now I'm going to call this rocks and man. And say okay. And now you're going to paint the rocks. So what do you paint with? Well, generally the paintbrush tool. And we're not going to specifically look at libraries of paintbrushes right now, but I would like you to go up above to the control bar and see how it's changed because you've now selected a different tool, and you're going to select a soft brush. And you also are going to change the mode of painting from normal to multiply. And working on the same layer. And now I'm going to paint the rocks. So this is where having a Wacom tablet comes in really handy. I would go to your Wacom tablet in order to paint well. And let me go get mine quickly. Or I can use my mouse just because I don't have my Wacom in front of me. but I'll go get it. So here's my Wacom tablet. Whenever I need to paint, I have to reach for my Wacom tablet. So you see my Wacom tablet is a medium-sized tablet. It's not too large. We talked about you're needing Wacom tablets at the beginning. So I'm going to paint now with the paintbrush, and I'm going to paint the rocks. I'm going to change, as I said, my mode to multiply. At some point in the next few weeks, I will put up a handout or reading on modes and what to expect from the different modes when you paint. But multiply is a mode that lets you see the texture underneath. So it's really useful because you can always see it applies the paint according to the lightness and darkness of your surface. So I'm painting now with a violet color, which is kind of what I want because that's the color of the sky. If you wanted it to be a bit darker, a bit lighter, you could go back to swatches and make sure that you've picked the right color in swatches, the color that you really want to paint with. I'll pick a slightly darker violet. And then I want to make sure that my opacity is correct. So I'm bringing down my opacity so I can layer if I want. So I'm actually painting with about 20% opacity. And I'm using the paint, just a regular soft paintbrush, round, just a normal round paintbrush. And I'm going to paint the rocks. So make the paintbrush fairly large, and you're also going to paint the man. And you'll see that as you start to put color, just be very sensitive about it. You can kind of dot it on. It changes the color of the rocks. And let's say that you feel you're still getting too much color, then you can go change the opacity and make it a tiny bit lighter. Notice that it's only painting the selected areas, which is fine. And you also got some of this time you got some of the plants in there, so you can kind of make sure that they end up with a little bit of violet on them as well. So it's really now beginning to look like sunset. You know, when you look up and you're driving along the 210, you look up at the mountains and everything has been changing color. Now notice there's a little rock that's not included in your selection. And if you want to change that, you could go back to the quick select. I didn't notice that that wasn't included. You could go back to the quick select tool and add this to the selection. So, and then you could save it again if you wanted. So I'm going to go in on it and just change this selected area here by using the quick select and holding shift and making sure that it's included now in the selection. And that should have done it. And you can actually add it. You can save the selection again and add it to the selection. So my zoom here, there it is. So, and I need to paint that little area. So go back to the paintbrush tool. Paint that. I also painted the man a little bit. Okay. So if there's areas that aren't selected, you can go back and make sure that they get painted. And you've saved this selection, so if you need to, if you get out of it, Command D lets you out of it, you don't have it selected now, you can select it by just going to select, load selection, and go to Man and Rocks, and say okay, and then you'll have that selection again. You should have that selection again. So you need to be on the right layer, and load selection would, if you go back to sky, oh, Rocks and Man, there, that Rocks and Man is now selected. But you needed to change the selection, save it again if you added something. Notice that my rock that I needed, but that I painted before, isn't in this selection because I didn't add it. I didn't save it again save in the select menu. Okay, so the next thing I want to quickly show you is how to do something to a specific part of the image. You have to make a new layer. So you have to select and then move it to a new layer before you can do a layer effect on it. So I'm going to deselect everything. So Command D is the command for that. And then I'm going to select just this rock in the foreground, and hopefully I can get it. So I'm going to my quick select tool, and actually I want to zoom out a little bit. Go to the quick select tool, which is the fourth one down again, and hold shift and just move it around in this. Try to see if you can select this rock. It might take a little bit of doing because part of it isn't too clear. So you're going to have to minus, hold Option and minus, and see if you can get just this rock. A little bit difficult. The quick select is having a little trouble seeing the edge of the rock. So I have to go between Option and plus, or you can go up to the quick select tools right up here. You could also draw this selection, which I might be showing you later with the pen tool, but I got it. It also selected the shadow, and we don't want that, so we have to hold Option and deselect. So I'm holding Option, just kind of moving the quick select around in the shadow to take it away. There's my rock. So I'm going to say save selection again. So select, save selection, and call it rock. So if you lose it, you can get it back again. And now I want to copy that onto a new layer. So I'm going to say add a layer in my layers palette. And then I'm going to say Command C, and it's literally copying those pixels, but I wasn't on the right layer. So you have to go to the Man and Rocks layer where the pixels are, say Command C, and then onto the new layer, do Command V, which is place or paste. So it added the rock into the new layer. And if you want, you could label that layer. I can double click on the layer and say rock. In Illustrator, I told you many times to label your layers. It's very useful. And now you could paint that rock on that layer. So you don't even need to select it, I don't think, but maybe we should, just to be safe, load selection and say rock, okay. And we're going to paint it. So I'm going to go to the paintbrush tool, and again, leave it at multiply and opacity low. Go to a greenish color, because we're going to pretend like this rock has kind of a radioactive problem. So we're going to try to put a glow on it. And I'm actually going to paint the rock itself a little bit. So let's see if I can get it to look a little bit greener. Yeah. So I'm painting it with just a regular paintbrush. And then I'm going to put a glow on it, a green glow. So how do you do that? It's in layer, but you would not be able to do this if you hadn't copied the pixels that you want to put the vector, the effect onto. So you can't just select pixels in an image and put an effect. It won't work. You have to actually have the pixels that you want to put the effect on or the layer style on in a new layer, and then it'll do it. So layer style, go to layer and layer style, and then you can, in the cascading menu, move over and say outer glow. And it will let you choose a color. So I'm going to pick green again because I want this to have kind of a, as I said, an effect of a radioactive glow. And then you can say okay with the color, and you can move your layer style, your outer glow. And if you click on preview in layer style, you'll be able to see this happen on your image. There it is. So here's my image. I have preview on in outer glow, layers, it came from layer style. And I'm going to move some of the sliders around. Perhaps you want the spread to be more or less. And the size, all of these are choices. So you choose the way you want it, and then say okay. And there is your final result. And you can deselect if you want, because I still have that selection. I'm going to do Command minus so they can see the image a little bit better. And if you deselect, Command D, you've deselected the rock, you have that kryptonite glow on the rock. It looks like a sunset. So you've changed the time of day. And that is my demo for exercise 4. So you want to save this, save as, and I would actually like to see your layers. So you can hand this in just as a PSD file. I think Canvas will be fine with that. So right now it's in Photoshop format. So just leave it as a Photoshop document and leave all of these options checked and call it exercise 4 and your name. You might have done that before if you were working on this exercise in phases, and save it. I'm saving onto my desktop. If you save it as a PDF, let's just look at the options so that I am able to instruct you later. It will save it as a Photoshop PDF. Whoops. Don't save it as a JPEG because that flattens it. And don't save it as a TIFF because it leaves it too large. But Photoshop PDF. And let's see what happens when you say save. So I'm not sure if I get your layers or not. So I'd rather you just save it as a Photoshop document. I think I do get your layers when you save it as a PDF, but with this, in this one, just this time, I think with your, with the Photoshop exercises, I'd rather you just hand them in as PSD files, which is Photoshop. And then I definitely get all your layers and I can see if you understood what you were doing. Okay, thank you. That's the end of this video.